Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, we just earlier today had the April developer livestream for Diablo 4, and they revealed quite a bit of info about the endgame specifically for everyone who's been wondering about that, a whole pile of explanations of systems that we have heard very little tidbits about, but hadn't been able to get a full grasp of due to NDAs from people experiencing the proper closed beta, and also changes that have been made over the course of development of the last couple of years that the game has been being made. But as of this point, the devs have said from this point forward, the game is pretty much locked in, only minimal changes from here on out until launch, where things are of course a little bit up in the air still. Part of Diablo 4 being a live service game is that it gives them the ability to change things big or small, however and whenever they deem necessary to do so. But generally speaking, this means that the systems we'll be talking about today are just how they'll work in the full game that releases June 6th, which is awesome to be able to actually see and get a proper concept of for ourselves. Of course, you can watch the stream yourself if you want all of the info, but it is 90 minutes long, and after watching it for myself, I thought it'd be fun to sort of concisely share the new and interesting information that is relevant to all of us who only got to experience the recent public betas. Those of us who have had a million questions about what the game will be like beyond level 25, as that was what we were locked into. That said, we got a lot of info about what will be happening with the later world tiers that you unlock at level 50 and above, info about the Paragon system and how it will work in this game, as it is a whole new type of leveling we've not experienced in Diablo before in the specific way that they've done it this time around. All of the activities that we'll have access to in later world tiers as well, some of the unique and special gear that we'll get to play around with that's different from what we've seen up to this point too, and of course also proper confirmation of the return of seasonal realms. As well, we were told that we'll have another developer livestream happening in early May, going over a lot of the more seasonal aspects of the game, specifically if you want to know more about that, which many of us of course do. With that said then, let's dive right into what we expect to have after level 25. Of course, there is the rest of the story itself, which is quite fun to look forward to, which you are expected to complete somewhere around level 45 to 50. Then you can unlock World Tier 3, the next difficulty step up. We also got confirmation that higher world tiers do a lot more than just generally increase the health and damage of monsters. It also messes with their AI in more unique ways, making them more aggressive, making them group up a little bit more in their attacks, changing their actual attack speed in general, changing their targeting so they work together better, adding a bit more tracking to projectile attacks, and all kinds of things like this to affect difficulty in a much more interesting way than literally just statistical changes. And in order to unlock a new world tier, then you'll need to complete a capstone dungeon. From the sound of these are actually really cool. They're extra special dungeons, much longer than the average dungeon, much more challenging with multiple proper bosses inside that you'll have to learn the mechanics of to be able to succeed, with the main idea behind these being that they're a sort of checkpoint. These are tests that you have to pass to prove that you're ready to unlock the next world tier. So think of them as a sort of milestone that you've reached and have to complete. Reaching the ability to do the capstone dungeons is one thing, but completing them is entirely different, and that sounds really exciting to me as someone who loves a good challenge to test how well I built synergies for my class throughout the skill trees and also my legendaries and everything like that. Once you complete the capstone dungeon, then you'll unlock World Tier 3. This is when things get much more real. The first time that you complete the story, you'll get access to a place called the Tree of Whispers for a mechanic called the Whispers of the Dead. These will give you daily quests to complete certain broader objectives like defeating a large number of enemies of a specific type in a specific region, things like this. And these Whispers of the Dead quests will reward you with relatively higher tier loot, as well as Nightmare Sigils. Nightmare Sigils are what you'll use to access Nightmare Dungeons, our first major endgame mechanic accessible starting in World Tier 3.
Let the games begin!
Nightmare Dungeons are essentially just super upgraded versions of the regular dungeons. They'll take place in the locations you've already been able to visit the regular version of, but the enemies inside will be scaled to match the Nightmare Sigil itself, and also some of the objectives may well change. These sigils come at various tiers. The main places that you'll get these sigils will be Whispers of the Dead, as well as rewards from the Nightmare Dungeons themselves, which will always provide you with higher tier sigils than the one that you complete. Every sigil, along with having its own difficulty level, will also have its own afflictions, or affixes. These can change much more core parts of the dungeon as a whole, adding things like hell portals, which occasionally spawn that bring in droves of enemy types not native to that dungeon itself, making you stay on your toes about what types of foes you'll be facing, and making you make more active tactical decisions about how and when you destroy the portals themselves. There's other major affixes like these that will make lightning and stun pulse around an object that follows you occasionally, which you can either use to your advantage if you play it right, or just be screwed over by if you let it hit you yourself. These are considered major affixes, but there are also just sort of passive changes like boosted lightning lightning damage, reduced cooldowns every time you get a kill, or explosions when you impair the control of an enemy. Different tiers of nightmare sigils will also change the amount of revives that you're allowed to do within a dungeon, so the higher tier that you get, the more dangerous that it gets to do as well. They've said that the maximum level of monsters at the highest tier of nightmare sigil will be around the equivalent of player level 150, which is ridiculous when you consider that the maximum player level is 100. So that is really there for just the hyper endgame style stuff when you're in fully maximized builds capable of doing things that would normally be impossible for a character at your own level. Past that, we also got confirmation that there are certain legendary powers that will only be available in later world tiers, so there's tons of stuff that we haven't seen yet on that front too. Of course, there are also ancestral items, sacred items, and unique items that we won't start having drop until world tiers 3 and 4. Unique items are like legendaries, but built to be even more powerful and have effects locked to a specific piece of armor or weapon. Some good examples of this are one for necromancer that makes you spawn a free bone spirit after you pick up 5 blood orbs that does damage based on your current life percentage. One for rogue that makes rain of arrows be permanently affected by literally every imbuement at the same time. That's really cool. And one for sorcerer that makes fireball bounce as it travels, exploding every time it hits the ground rather than just one explosion. These are all incredibly interesting changes to the base functions of certain abilities that can totally shake up the way that you play your class. Sacred items are items that are rated for much higher levels but equipable at lower levels. For example, you could find a sacred item at level 50 that is the equivalent of level 70 stats but is equipable at level 50. Stick the right legendary effect on it and suddenly you have an uber powerful legendary significantly above your pay grade. Past this, in World Tier 3 you'll start seeing Hell Tides. Hell Tides are massive events that spawn in specific areas around the world and last for about an hour each time. An area under Hell Tide will have tons of extra monsters, all of which are significantly powered up and also drop items called cinders for the duration. These are a special Hell Tide related currency. Hell Tide areas are full of things called Hell Tide caches, a special sort of chest full of goodies. Every chest in a Hell Tide area will be marked to tell you what is inside, at least in concept. It will tell you what slot the item is within it, and it will be a relatively powerful item every time for that slot. Say you really need an upgrade for your boots, for example, as maybe they're your weakest item. Enter a Hell Tide and find the cache that has boots icon above it, farm the cinders required to open that cache, go back to the cache and get yourself a pair of powerful boots. Every time that you die in a Hell Tide area, you will lose about half of your cinders, so you do have to be a bit careful, and if you leave a Hell Tide area or if the timer runs out, your cinders will disappear, so everything you do in a Hell Tide will only last for the duration of that Hell Tide itself except for the items that you get, so make sure that you actually use these within the timer. You can't stock up to go to a different Hell Tide, nothing like that. There will also be certain special events that only spawn during Hell Tide, and also the Butcher can show up in Hell Tides because why not? He's just a lovely little guy looking for where the fun's at. There are also special crafting materials that uniquely drop from enemies in Hell Tides like Fiend's Roses, which are used to modify and enchant legendary items, so this will definitely be worth your time no matter what your actual goals are. Then finally, for your general endgame activities are the Fields of Hatred, which are areas built for open world PvP, and the way that these works is actually quite familiar if you've played a game like The Division, for example. But to explain it in greater detail, essentially, you can complete PvE objectives in these areas to earn something called Shards of Hatred, a special currency that you can use to buy cosmetics and other goodies. If you leave the area, these will be destroyed unless you purify them first at a set location and set area. There are multiple of these locations around the place, and when you are purifying your shards at one of these, it will send out a beacon to everyone in the area telling them that purification is happening here. If other players kill you before your shards are purified, they can steal your shards. So essentially, there's just a big risk and reward type of activity that rewards a lot of tacticality. They've said that there is matchmaking in place so that a level 25 player won't be against a level 100 in this area, but this doesn't account for groups, so you can be a solo player who gets jumped on by a group of 4. That's just the way that they want the activity to feel, making you think a lot more and actually plan your routes and stuff for how to actually do this properly. With all that covered then, let's round it all off by talking about the mammoth system that is Paragon in Diablo 4. Once you reach level 50, you'll stop earning regular skill points and instead start earning Paragon points as you level up instead. The maximum level for your characters is 100, and at the end of your journey you're expected to have around 220 Paragon points to spend. Every class has a variety of things called Paragon boards available to them, which are sort of like bingo cards, or in a way, they're like somewhat conventional skill trees done in a whole new way. Every board is centered mostly around one legendary skill. For example, this one that we got to see an example of is for Sorcerer, and is focused around the concept of crackling energy. This is an effect for some of your lightning-based skills that makes a little ball form on the floor that periodically damages enemies around you when you walk over it and activate it. There are 4 levels of node in a Paragon board: normal nodes, magic nodes, rare nodes, and legendary nodes. Normal nodes are more mundane things like simple stat bonuses. Magic nodes are more impactful things like like plus 8.5% crackling energy damage. Rare nodes are more notable effects with secondary bonuses. The example that we were given is plus 32% damage to elites, as well as 14% bonus movement speed for 4 seconds after killing an elite, but this has a secondary bonus effect where if you have more than 260 dexterity on your character, you get another 16% bonus damage to elites as well. Then the legendary node on this board, every Paragon board theoretically has one of these, is crackling energy has a 25% chance to not consume a charge when triggered, as well as having its damage increased by 2% for every 20 intelligence that you have. As you can see, this is clearly a Paragon board focused around crackling energy, and specifically the more lightning-based effects for the sorcerer class. On top of this, it gets even more complex as you can actually rotate the Paragon boards completely, which lets you choose your starting point in the skill tree based around the path that you want to take. You can plan and plot out which normal, magic, and rare nodes that you want to go for on your way to the legendary nodes, and choose where you want to start based on that. You also don't have to finish a Paragon board either. You can just put a few points into it and then move on to a different board, but know that your costs on a subsequent Paragon board will be more expensive than the first board that you get, so on and so forth. This incentivizes committing to one that you really want a lot of the bonuses from to start with, and then just move on to another one to focus on afterwards in a more secondary manner. On top of this, there are also sort of empty slots on a Paragon board, and these are for Paragon glyphs. These are items that you'll start to find once you hit Nightmare difficulty that have their own unique effects. An example being Tactician, this one here. You can slot these glyphs into the empty slots in a Paragon board once you've reached them, and doing so has its own unique effects as well. These glyphs have effects based on the nodes that are near them, but they also buff the nodes near them too. For example, this Tactician glyph boosts the rare nodes within its radius of effect by 50% and also makes you deal 10% increased damage after casting a defensive skill if you've purchased 25 dexterity worth of nodes within the radius. The base stats of a glyph, as well as the radius of its effect, can actually change, and this is done after completing a Nightmare dungeon, which allows you to upgrade the level of a glyph every single time, so these systems are actually very intrinsically tied together. Think of each Paragon board like a class specialization. You can mix and match a bit, but you'll only want to really focus on a couple of them with the 220 Paragon points that you'll have available to spend, at least at first. Essentially, the idea behind this is that you can have 2 fire mages with the exact same set of skills on their bar that have instead totally different Paragon boards to accomplish different things. And while there's a ton of complexity to the system, like a ridiculous amount of it, I think once we get accustomed to it, it should actually be quite fun to mess with. And that's about it for today, everyone. All of the properly new stuff that we got to learn from today's developer update livestream. Oh, one more thing though, there is another final public open beta event happening from May 12th to the 14th, so we get to play the game one more time before release. This event is being labeled as a server slam. They want as many people to be playing during this as possible and really just shove the crap out of their servers. This isn't any new content inside of this for those who've done the previous public betas, and it seems like our old characters have been wiped as well, so you'd have to start fresh. The level cap for this event is level 20, which is lower than previously, and the main real reason that you would do this, at least for your own personal gain, is that there is one unique item that you get for taking part. If you kill the world boss at level 20 during this event, you'll unlock a cosmetic horse trophy to walk around with in the full game. Other than that, it's just another opportunity to dive into the game before release, and this will also include changes that they've made since the last beta due to our own feedback as a community. And that's everything, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this roundup of info from the live stream. I tried to make it all as concise and digestible as possible while hitting all the main points as well, so I hope it all made sense and helped you gain a greater understanding of what to expect from the full game experience in Diablo 4. Look forward to more news coming in early May with the aforementioned dev livestream focused around seasonal aspects and such like that. It should be quite fun. Until then though, get excited for the next little beta test that we have coming up and prepare to enter the final phase of waiting for the game to properly release in early June. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.